Hello, my name is Julie Campbell. I write under the name J.A. Campbell, and today I'm going to do a reading out of my book called Jada of the Raptors. It's kind of a futuristic, dystopian, Julie of the Wolves sort of tale, if you're familiar with that old children's story from, I don't know, when I was a kid about I think she was an Inuit who escaped her family and went and lived with the wolves for a while. Similar idea. One of my favorite books as a kid. So I decided to write a dinosaur story, kind of like that. And I'm going to read for about 10 minutes here, and here we go. Jada of the Raptors. I needed to learn, so I watched. Crouched in the leafy canopy, I learned who controlled the pack. Hidden behind rocks, covered in mud to hide my scent, I learned who followed. The smallest seems the most curious, while the two leaders, Alpha and Beta, appeared to be fair. The other two, they were the unpredictable ones. Best to start with the smallest. I planned. Icy water stung my skin, feeling numb, fingers dead. If I crouched here much longer, I'd be too slow. Hunger gnawed at me. My last two catches were stolen before I could reach arboreal safety. Not only could I count my ribs, but I could almost dig my fingers under them. I needed to eat, but this hunt wasn't for me. Just as I was about to give up, a shadow rushed out from under a rocky ledge. Twisting slowly, then darting, the trout came out to explore. Discomfort forgotten, I held my breath. Just a little more. There! I jerked my hands together, reaching for the fish. Fighting muscles made cold from water. Hooking the gills, I jerked the fish from its watery domain. Holding on to it took all of my fading strength, but I rushed from the stream and ran for the nearest climbable tree before the scavengers heard the struggle. I made it. A bit of vine threaded through the gills gave me something other than slippery fish to hold onto as I scaled the tree. I relaxed, reasonably safe in the treetops, surrounded by the fresh scent of trees, the singing birds. It was almost perfect, except for the hunger pains gnawing at my guts, the scrapes on my hands from the rough bark, and the bags under my eyes that reflected back to me whenever I tried to fish. It was hard to sleep deeply in a tree, even one with branches as broad as this one had. I couldn't rest long. The pack would be back soon. Unable to resist, I cut a small slab from the trout. Next, I uncovered a small ember I kept kindled. Strips of dry bark wrapped tightly around the smoldering tinder kept it from bursting into flame and would keep it burning for quite some time. Fluffing the kindling, I kept it in the tree with me. I built up a tiny fire, though I did little more than sear the meat before my hunger took over. Only the strongest self-control kept me from devouring the entire fish. My stomach grumbled and my ribs ached, but I focused on the goal. The underbrush rustled. They were back. I had a dog once, as a young child, before the war. A German shepherd, all black and nearly bigger than I was. We went everywhere together. My best friend. My pack. I named her Stella, my constant companion. In my 8th year, Mom began dating again. Men came and went, making little impression on my life until him. Mom sent me to bed after dinner, Stella paddling alongside me. Not long after, he came to tuck me in. His rough hands bruised my arms. I gasped. Stella's roar sent vibrations through my chest. It would have done an Allosaurus proud. The man ran. Stella's soft coat soaked up my tears. I needed a pack again. I carried the fish to the edge of their territory, rubbed my hands all over its flesh to cover it with my scent, and checked the fish as far into their nest as I could, aiming for the area the smallest one preferred. And then I ran like my life depended on it, because it did. I made it into the trees and turned to watch. The youngest held a bit of fish in her jaws, while the alpha consumed the rest. The other 3 stalked my trail, tails swinging behind them, heads bobbing and darting as their nostrils flared. They scented the air until they reached my tree. The 2 mid-sized raptors circled, while the beta tilted his head and looked up at me. My heart hammered in my chest, and my lungs ached. Adrenaline raced through me so powerfully it hurt, but I forced myself to meet the creature's eyes. I needed a pack. Once upon a time, dinosaurs went extinct. Many, many years later, a man made a movie about bringing them back. Years after that, a woman actually engineered their return. Unlike in the movie, this group of scientists and entrepreneurs had no trouble with containment. My mom even took me to see them when I was young, before the war. I always loved the Utah Raptors the best. Their brown and gray feathers, sometimes with tan and black, hints of other colors adding to their camouflage, the way they hunted like a wolf pack. As an 8-year-old, that part had always been my favorite. I threw the fish and ran for a different tree. They were smart, the raptors. I had to vary my tactics, and the times I arrived to throw the fish. Next time I would deliver the fish while they were away from the nest. Doing more than simply feeding myself was a good motivator. My fishing skills improved rapidly, and I could finally catch enough for my daily offering and have one meal for myself. I hated fish. It might not have been so bad if I had salt and pepper, or some lemon to accent the flavor. Without it, it tasted like badly cooked, nearly flavorless meat, except it was fishy, nearly flavorless meat. I hated being weak from starvation more. The raptors gathered under my tree when I cooked now. I wasn't sure if they wanted me or the leftovers I threw down to them. I wasn't yet brave enough to find out. Licking the last of the juices from my fingers, I studied the dinosaurs below. The one I dubbed youngest, though I wasn't positive she actually was younger, though she was smaller, had yellow accents to her feathers. The alpha had some rich burgundy mixed in with her camouflage, and a long scar across the top of her muzzle. The beta raptor, a big male, had teal highlights to his feathers and a bare spot on his flank that looked like he had been hooked by a claw. The female middle dinosaur had a rich purple streak along her back and a twisted claw on her right hand, for lack of better words. The middle male raptor had deep blue feathers accenting his arms and legs. They were all beautiful. I gathered the entrails and tossed them down to the waiting dinosaurs. The morsels never made it to the ground. Hungry jaws full of sharp teeth snapped up the chum from the air like they were trained dogs. But these were no hounds, and one misstep would likely be my last. Sometimes I asked myself what I was doing out here in the wilderness. It would be so easy to go back, rejoin my oppressed companions, and try to rise enough to join the ranks of the oppressors. I could run, though as I leaned back, trying to make myself comfortable in the tree. I thought as I leaned back, trying to make myself comfortable in the tree. The young raptor settled below me. Though she probably only hoped for more scraps, I let myself pretend she protected me. Whatever her motivation, she did protect me, and I would sleep easier with her there. Maybe I should name them. But what names could capture their cunning, their savage beauty, and their fierce natures? I didn't know, so I let the thought drift away as I dismissed the thought of running. The dinosaurs kept our territory safe from outside invaders. At first a blessing, the security quickly turned to a curse. The wall that kept the dinosaurs out also kept the dinosaurs and people in. When Carson and his gang took control, it allowed him time to consolidate his power and prevented us from going and getting outside help. Some of Carson's men patrolled our borders. I might be able to get past them and the predators, but if I could get a pack. Mostly I wanted protection, but revenge had crossed my mind, and maybe freedom for my people. Damn, I needed more fish. The pack became more adept at anticipating my random fish tosses. I tried to make them even more random. Not brave enough to try and face them on the ground, I waited until the pack left before climbing out of the tree I currently called home. My fingers and toes had toughened to the point where I no longer felt the rough bark abrade my skin. What remained of my clothing barely covered me, but it kept the softer bits of skin somewhat protected. Winter was several months off. Until then, sweat slicked my dark skin, and I didn't mind being mostly naked. The dinosaurs didn't care. I dropped to the ground, listened, and crept forward. The raptors were out hunting, so I deposited the fish two this time and turned to hurry back to my tree. If it isn't Jada, my long-lost mate. I froze, hair at the nape of my neck rising. The voice brought back memories, blood cooling on my face, feeling helpless. What were we without weapons to Carson? Only breeders, only workers. I never expected Carson's men to venture into raptor territory. Maybe they didn't know. Steve stood there, nasty smile chilling my blood. Rick and Lawrence stood to either side of me, both holding long knives. Steve took a step forward. It's time you returned home, Jada. We're worried about you. I hadn't spoken to another human in weeks. I wasn't about to start with these three. They were the worst of Carson's men. Stepping backward toward the nest, I debated running. I might make it, but now they knew where I lived. Damn them. I needed a pack. I preferred the idea of death by raptor to Steve's touch. Steve took my silence as submission. He grabbed for me. I darted out of reach, but I didn't scream. That was a weak sound, a prey sound. Instead, I did my best imitation of the raptor's hunting call. It wasn't quite the same coming from a human throat, but it was recognizable. What the hell was that? Lawrence hefted his knife and glanced over his shoulder. Rick looked around wildly. Grab the bitch and let's get out of here, Lawrence said. This is meat-eater territory. I called again and ran. Steve tackled me around my legs, knocking the wind out of me. I gasped, kicking out, but Steve had a good grip. He crawled up my body, heavy weight trapping me to the ground, rocks and sticks digging into my back. Shrieking as he grabbed my breast, I tried to shove him off me, but he pinched my skin and a painful cry escaped. Hey, boss, Lawrence persisted. Got half a mind to take what's mine right here. Steve's rancid breath made me turn my face away. His leer made me gag. But Lawrence is right, I'll have you later. Steve shoved me down again as he pushed himself up. I winced as a sharp branch jabbed me in the rib. Laughing, he aimed a kick at my face. I twisted, cringing. The blow never connected. Warily, I opened my eyes. Steve was nowhere to be seen. Boss? Lawrence looked around, clutching his knife. Wet snaps drew my attention. Leaves rustled, and I spotted Steve's leg disappearing into the underbrush. The Raptors were back. Lawrence and Rick glanced at each other, and then at me. I grinned. The men stood facing the woods. I got to my knees, then carefully stood. Not fast, not like prey. I backed away from the terrified men, flinching slightly as two raptors, towering over me, ghosted past on either side. They're so close their feathers tickled my sweat-soaked skin. Lawrence whimpered. Rick hissed at him to be quiet. Dead men talking. They focused on the two raptors stalking them. Rick never saw Beta as he darted in from the side. The man's scream split the air and cut off with a crunch. Lawrence ran, fell, tried to get back to his feet. The youngest pounced from the underbrush, landing on Lawrence's back, breaking his spine. The pack had saved me. The alpha stepped into the small clearing, seeming to chirp approval before she swung her head and looked at me. Any lingering relief I felt fled as those cold eyes studied me. I forced my breathing to stay steady, wishing my heart would slow. Adrenaline made it hard to think, but I dropped my gaze as I had seen the others do. Submissive was not prey, submissive was pack. She stalked toward me and the others turned and circled. I took a deep breath. If I died today, at least I'd seen some of Carson's men go before me. That thought calmed me somewhat, slowing my racing heart. Kept my gaze downcast, but watched the alpha out of the corner of my eye. That was also a pack thing to do. Complete submission never happened. She clucked in her throat. I didn't know how to respond, so I attempted to make a chuffing sound I'd heard the youngest utter frequently. The alpha tilted her head as if curious and walked forward until she stopped just before me. I didn't move when she sniffed me, even when she bumped me with her snout, deadly teeth nearly brushing my skin. She nudged me, and I let her. Seeming satisfied, she stepped back, but when one of the other raptors came too close, I stamped my foot and hissed. The alpha tilted her head again, clearly studying me. The middle male raptor hissed back, but the alpha snapped at him and he slunk away. Chirping, then letting out a low trill, the alpha walked past me and bent to investigate the kill. That seemed to be the signal. The rest of the pack flowed around me to the bodies. Not wanting to press my luck, especially while they feasted on human flesh, I backed away and headed for my tree. The youngest saw me move and watched as I left. I carefully climbed the tree, putting it between myself and the raptors. Once I reached safety, I wanted to laugh with delight and weep with exhaustion. I'd done it. The pack had protected me. Of course, that didn't mean they would do it again. Okay, so, there's still more left in that story, but that's kind of the beginning. And thanks for listening.